Hello, BookTube. All right, this channel recently hit 13K, and we're doing a Q&A, and we're on part 3. And we're at Ed Raby. I have a few questions on the book Animal Farm. Your thoughts on the book? Is the story good? Do you think his intent works? Do you see both sides of our current political tribes using the book as a warning about the other side? I find it interesting that he never seems to tell the reader what to think, unlike political novels today. Do you find this idea that Orwell reserved judgment to his reader as true? Your thoughts on Orwell as a writer? Well, obviously, you want an hour-long reaction analysis of everything that George Orwell wrote and how he wrote it, and that's not going to work for Q&A. I like Animal Farm, fine, and I like Orwell as a writer, fine, and I would agree with you that he doesn't really grab the reader by the nose and rub their face in his deeper meanings, and that is refreshing. Candace Uri says, 13 nay becomes 13 hey. Steve, at the risk of winding your stem on such a glorious occasion, what's Hyde Cottage's take on a potential swap of pothead WNBA player Brittany Griner for Merchant of Death arms dealer Victor Boat? I think it's a crock, but I am not a book reviewer. Well, I don't understand the mechanics of it myself. The person that we would be giving up is as an obvious danger to international society. And I don't get it. I don't understand the politics involved, so I haven't really thought about it. If you're looking, I mean, we're obviously not, but if you were looking at the two people involved, merely in terms of how they dip the scale on their danger to international society, the basketball player is no danger to international society. It's no danger to anyone at all. And the person that we'd be exchanging will do evil. It will hurt people. So, but we're not looking at it that way. There are other considerations involved. N.P. Hunt has a paragraph. Let's see here. What do you think of the books by Robin Ince about books and reading? They've always struck me as a little twee, a little light, like most books on that subject do. Who has been the biggest disappointment for you as a second-generation author? For example, did you initially get excited for works by Martin Amis, Brian Herbert, etc., only to be frustrated when you actually read them? Biggest disappointment, I guess, would probably be David Updike. Out on the Marsh, I think, was his first collection of short stories that I read and thought, and the biggest disappointment was I was hoping that he would be better than his father, different from his father, and he wasn't. And I don't think I've read anything else. I think he's gone on to write other things, but I don't think I've read anything after his first thing. N.P. Hunt has an enormous paragraph. My wife loves dogs as much as I do, so much more than humans, and is training to be a dog groomer at the College of Animal Welfare. She wants me to help her set up her own business when she qualifies, which I'm more than happy to try, even though dogs don't like being groomed. No, they don't. Still, I'd rather work with dogs than humans. What tips would you give to anyone who wants to work with dogs? I've never done it. I don't have any tips. Humans don't understand dogs. Even the ones that love them and work with them tend to understand only about... The highest I've ever seen a human go is 20%, something like that. Most of the rest of it is guesswork. And there's quite a bit of fear, which can only come from not understanding what you're seeing and the person who's right in front of you. And the fear is very obvious. It dumps huge amounts of sugar into the human bloodstream. It changes the way your sweat smells, even to me, much less to dogs. I don't have any advice on the subject. I've never done it before. Also, my little girl Quinzel wagged her tail a lot when I told her that Steve saw her photos and said she was beautiful. I'm convinced that she knows who you are. Well, no. Much as I like it, it doesn't work that way. I had a friend years and years ago went to an event in Hollywood, and there was a dog at the event. And he went up to the dog, bent over, and whispered in the dog's ear, "Steve says hello." I think he actually says, "Your king says hello." And he got no reaction because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work by word of mouth, and it doesn't work by electronics. I would need to meet your little baby. Then it would work, but not until then, no. Benji says, "Hi, Steve. Number 1, what's your favorite part of Wales?" Oh, God. It's such a beautiful country. I don't know that I could narrow it down to one part. Did you read anything in Welsh during your travels there or in Patagonia? I don't read Welsh. And sorry if you've answered this before. I'm new. Well, welcome. But no, I've never answered these before. I don't have good answers to either one of them. Not off the top of my head. Nerdishly Fit says, "Hi Steve, when you read a hardcover, do you leave the dust jacket on or off?" I leave it on. I know it's more expensive than a Kindle or Kobo, but I recently got an iPad Mini 6, and it might be the closest thing to a perfect e-reader. Your thoughts? This is an iPad Mini 4, the one of you sent me, and I am openly covetous of the iPad Mini 6. Openly covetous. I mean, this is a great device, but I almost immediately started banging my head against 16 gigs of storage. I think I would very much like an iPad Mini 6 with the maximum amount of storage. I don't think if I had that I would ever use any other device except my laptop. I think I would use it to film. I think I would use it to watch videos. Probably even a lot of writing, too, because you've got it right there with you. That makes up a lot for no ease of a touch-type keyboard, is that you've got it right with you at all times. I am openly covetous of the iPad Mini 6. I will not use my massive, sexy influencer cred to demand that you send me your own. I have a heart. But yeah, it could be the perfect device. Not just for e-reading, but for anything. Perfect size, perfect combination of workhorse ability internals and sleekness and elegance of design. What do you think of Endurance by Alfred Lansing? I like it. Who is the better history biographer between H.W. Brands and Ron Chernow? There's no way to say. Are you a fan of Colson Whitehead's books? Usually, yes. And finally, what are your thoughts on Steve Berry and Daniel Silva? Well, they get the job done. They get a little bit boring for me. They don't ever challenge the conventions of their own writing. So they're very much for someone to, just the way they're stereotypically described, they're very much for someone to pick up one in an airport and just have something to do with your eyes. It's not going to stick in your mind. You're not going to care about it. You're not going to keep it. You're going to throw it in the nearest garbage can when you get off the plane. I've never really seen the worth in writing a book like that, but the authors would claim they don't write like that. William Fett says, "Hi Steve, what do you think of H.W. Brands, and do you like his Andrew Jackson biography?" I generally like him. I don't like his Jackson book. A couple of Frida questions. How many times do you take her out per day, and how long are your walks? Well, the number of times we go out in a day varies, because she doesn't have the freedom to come and go as she pleases. It's one of the only freedoms I deny her. So if she so much as suggests, if the thought so much as crosses her mind, maybe I'd like to go out for a bit. Then we go out. I drop everything immediately and we go. The only restriction on that is when, like now, it's boiling hot outside. That's dangerous for her in a way that extreme cold is not. So, on a normal I shouldn't say normal, because boiling hot is going to be normal. But in ye olden days, when it was temperate weather, if she only wanted a short walk, sometimes she only wants a short walk. Other times she wants to cover ground. She wants to go exploring and get really tired. So it totally varies depending on what she wants. She's in charge. Joanna says, "Hi Steve, what do you think about the Booker long list this year?" I think you could probably predict what I think of the Booker long list this year. It is, as all literary prize long lists now are and always will be, a pure exercise in virtue signaling. Let's see here. Leo Percara says, "Hello Steve, do you think writers like James Ellroy are not taken that seriously because they write inside genres, even though they are better than most award-winning contemporary authors?" I think that's probably the reason. Yeah, is that if the hoity-toity and now blue checkmark woke literary world can look at someone and say, "Oh, you're a crime writer," then they'll do that. They hate reading, and they're completely incurious about anything. So any chance they get to write something off without thinking about it, they'll take. Taking aside the obvious woke, okay, well, yeah. What's the best book on the Black Plague, fiction and nonfiction? Thank you. Best book I've read on it is Philip Ziegler's book, The Black Death, which is absolutely terrific. NP Hunt says, "I was raised in Glossop, Derbyshire. I wonder if you have any fond or not so fond memories of that place, even if it was just passing through between Manchester and Sheffield. I bet you remember the Snake Pass more than Glossop itself, but figured I'd ask, what's wrong with Glossop? What's wrong with Glossop? It's a wonderful place, and plenty of nature all around it. It's just gorgeous. If I remember correctly, I was more familiar with Old Glossop than Glossop, but it's Howard land. It's the Dukes of Norfolk. It's rich history land. If I remember correctly, has a whole bunch of sites that would be Steve sites. I think I spent a lot of time. I know that I overnighted for a couple of nights in Old Glossop. in a wonderful, wonderful old house that was very old. but what's wrong with it? Are you going to explain? I bet you're. I left Glossop at 21 and have rarely ever visited since. Oh my God, I'd go back and live there in a heartbeat. I would. But it's always my go-to answer for any question starting with "What's the weirdest place you ever did whatever?" It's the weirdest place I ever did anything. I don't know much about it now. I was there a long, long time ago. Probably before you were there. Does not old Glossop, but does Glossop have a market day, a market week? Does it have any shops, a bookstore? Probably not, right? Probably Sheffield. Well, anyway, Bass Van Dyke says, "Hey Steve, number one, what is your opinion of Jonathan Littell's The Kindly Ones?" I liked it. I'm not 100% sure that it's in complete control of itself. It's a big book and a sordid one. Very, very sordid. Very uncomfortable in a lot of places. In ways that I would probably have liked a lot more if I'd felt more authorly control. But that could very well be the translator. I didn't read it in the original. I've never read it in the original. I read it in the English language that came out and took this country by storm, 10 years ago, something like that. And often, the feeling of authorial control, of the feeling of the author having their hands on the wires at every point along the line, often that's one of the little intangibles that goes with a bad translator, or even an inconsistent translator. So could be that. And number two, which writer writes the most beautiful prose in the English language? I have no single candidate. I have no idea at all. Off the top of my head, beautiful prose is in short supply in the 21st century, so I don't have an answer. Sorry. Madman Gone Mad 2012 says, "Do you have any book recommendations about cats?" No. Did you enjoy the book When Elephants Weep? No, way too oversimplified and rampant anthropomorphizing. I wish I could have liked it, but no. That author has more sins on his book than credit. Is Robinson Crusoe worth the hype? Is Robinson Crusoe worth the hype? Yeah, it is. I'll go out on a limb here. Harrison Rex says, "Hi Steve, number one, I've heard some people on BookTube warn about Jules Verne translations. Is there a translation you recommend?" Yes, Jules Verne, like Alexander Dumas, tends to bring out the translation bros. I would look into it, right? If you're gonna embark on Jules Verne, look into it. Probably the more modern translation is the better one. There'll be a translator's note, and the translator of Jules Verne, I guarantee you, will be a translation bro. So they will lay out the pros and cons. Believe me, they will not hide their light under a bushel. They will tell you. So just read up on the work you're looking for. And do you recommend Nigel Tranter's Bruce Trilogy? Yes, I do. Good luck finding it. I had a trade paperback of the Bruce Trilogy for the longest time. No idea what happened to that thing. That was a long time ago that I had that thing. Dr. Bacon says, in the introduction to his translation of Gilgamesh, Stephen Mitchell claims that no book written after it gives voice to grief or the fear of death more powerfully. Yes, no book written after it does. Yeah. What do you make of this? Seems a bit overstated to me. It's pure codswallop. It's just nonsense. Michael Lombardo says, everyone out of the water, it's that time again. Do you look forward to or celebrate Shark Week? I used to like Shark Week a lot more than I do until they made that Megalodon documentary that was purely fake. I mean, you couldn't make a documentary about whether or not Megalodon survives today, but they didn't even try. They added fake footage that has just gone viral all over the cryptid subculture of YouTube without any notation that this is just made up. These are actors. And that Shark Week used to be, when it started, it was a celebration of sharks and learning about them, documentaries about them. If you're going to start introducing crap like that, I don't watch it anymore because of that. Because I don't know what's fake and what's real anymore. Because the producers don't seem to care. Arg says, "Hey Steve, why do you think that Pewdiepie is a fascist Nazi? I have watched a few of his videos and didn't see any of that. And it looks like he's also promoting reading nowadays. Thanks for being the GOAT." Well, I'm thinking of the infamous things. Him playing a practical joke where he gets people who can't read English to read a sign that says, death to all Jews or whatever. Him wearing Nazi paraphernalia. That sort of thing. If he's not a Nazi, he certainly makes it easy for Nazis to watch him, which I think is just as bad or worse in the influencer economy. Uh, Helen Utzinger says, which novel by Dennis Johnson would you recommend most? I don't know that I know this author well enough to make a case for recommending it most. Certainly my favorite was Storm Song, but I don't know if that's his best one. I don't know the author well enough to know that. Arg is back. Can you make a series or at least a few videos on some lesser known but interesting works available on Project Gutenberg? That's a great idea. I've had people recommend that to me in the past. Could you talk about Project Gutenberg? For those of you who don't know, Project Gutenberg is a vast archive of free EPUB books, electronic books. Go to it, bookmark it, just spend the day looking around. There's so much there, tens of thousands of titles. Everything that's in the common domain. And boy, oh boy, is there a lot to talk about on there. I just haven't ever, I'd have to conceive of that series and then do it. I've never actually followed through on that. Arg is back again. What are some of your favorite classical Sanskrit works? Can you make a Sanskrit literature starter kit? No, I can't. Steve King says, hello, Steve. As your biggest fan, it makes me quite sad to see you say such slanderous things about me. I understand you may not have liked my portrayal of a St. Bernard in my masterwork, Cujo, but that can't explain your hatred towards even my objectively perfect works, such as It or the Dark Tower series. My theory is that my book simply scared you too much. Misery can do that to a person. Check out Fairy Tale coming this September. Well, I don't think you're the real Stephen King, who I'm pretty sure does not know that this channel exists. But it certainly wasn't your portrayal of the St. Bernard in Cujo. It was your crappy writing. It was your pan-shallow, stupid, cliche characters. It was your unending sweet tooth for the easiest cliche that comes to mind. It was your horrible pacing. It was your inability to wrap up a story. It was your inability to plot. It was the paucity of your imagination. The minute you ring one fantasy element, science fiction horror element bell in a book on page 10, I know exactly what other bells you're going to ring. And I've read Fairy Tale already, thank you, and it stank. So, anyway, James Holder says, do you like the Animal series from Reaction? Have any histories or biographies stood out so far this year? I generally like the Reaction books. Very few of them are anything more than generally like, because usually I get the strong impression they're written quickly. In a series like that, I want the author to give me the basic natural history facts, but I also want them to do more than that. I want them to do something more than that. And if you're getting your money just for writing your 100 pages, then you're not going to work on more, and that shows. I very seldom get that. And as to your question, no histories or biographies have really stood out so far this year. I'm concentrating on the fact that the autumn is when they tend to bombard, rather than getting worried. 99 Goosebumps says, what is your favorite civilization's folklore or mythology? Well, that would be Irish folklore and mythology. CVBN457 is back. Steve, you strike me as a sports fan. What is your favorite sport? Every time I see a goalie throw a hole-in-one for a win at the bottom of the 9th quarter, I lose all composure trying to contain my elation. Spaminator out. I am not a sports fan at the moment. Lucas Pretty says, do you have any literary criticism recommendations? It would make a great video. Formal literary criticism is a complete waste of time. All of it's nonsense. Jim's books, reading, and stuff. What was the scariest non-human animal that you encountered in the wild, and what happened? For me, it would be poisonous reptiles, especially apex predator poisonous reptiles. Cobras. Some cobras, not so much rattlesnakes, although sometimes, but the big cobras can be very aggressive. And it is atavistically, it's just viscerally terrifying. To have a snake coming at you, it doesn't have any anatomy. It's to have a snake that it isn't just biting you because you accidentally stepped on it. It wants trouble. That is deeply disturbing. And as to what happened, well, they bit me. I've been bitten by every poisonous snake in the world that isn't in Australia. Arg is back. What is your opinion of David Sedaris and his works? I know he has tons of fans. He strikes me as very obvious as a humorist. I don't think I've read a word of his that made me laugh. Arg says, I am sorry for being a nosy twerp, but can you please tell us more about this mysterious surly houseboy of yours and why you haven't fired him yet, as being surly is his prime characteristic? Is he real? He is real. There are a handful of people connected with BookTube who have actually seen him, and a couple who have actually spoken to him. So he is real. There are plenty of people, connected with BookTube or not, who have visited here and simply not seen him. You just hide like a cat. But I haven't fired him because he's worth his weight in gold. His surliness is the least the price that I can pay for all that he does. Alex Downey says, "Hi Steve, being a big dog fan, I currently have a 2-year-old crazy beagle." I have been there. A 2-year-old crazy beagle. I have been there. 6 at a time. 2-year-old crazy beagle. What is your opinion of Cesar Milan? I can't stand him or his techniques. Yes, I can't stand him either. Just not at all. Not at all. I always say, in fact, I've said in this Q&A, how little humans tend to understand dogs, even dogs they live with, even humans who love dogs. I have noticed in my life how little they tend to understand what they're living with, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, so to speak. How little actual communication there is. It always amazes me. And he has, if anything, less than that amount of communication and thinks he has it all. I've figured these creatures out to crack their codes, so I'm going to brutalize them, I'm going to terrorize them, I'm going to mystify them, and get very poor or very equivocal results and charge people a mint for it. Be called the dog whisperer, or make people call me the dog whisperer. Don't do his techniques. Definitely don't do them, especially with a dog you don't know. Anyway, Shelf Life has a barrage of questions. Number 1, what are your top tips on keeping sexy during a heat wave? You just have to be very, very careful. Most of the world has a big heat wave coming in the next week. You have to be very, very careful and take it seriously. If you are thirsty, you are already dehydrated. The number 1 tip for a heat wave is stay hydrated. Stay hydrated. A physiologist could go into all the things that happen that your body does when it's reaching for moisture that isn't there and that it needs. Don't make it do that. Stay well hydrated. Drink a lot all the time when the heat index goes up. Also, limit your activity outside. Layered, light-colored clothing. Something on your head. All the usual stuff. Number 2, what are your thoughts on Heat Wave by Penelope Lively? I don't know that I even read it. So I don't have any standout thoughts on it. Number 3, what are your thoughts on Herman Hesse? What are your thoughts on Fran Lebowitz? I can't answer. Survey a person's work in a Q&A. I like both the people that you name. And number 5, what epistolary novels do you deem most successful? There have been about 1 million epistolary novels, and this is a Q&A. So, I cannot answer that question. Clarissa. Jenny Park says, "Hi, Steve and Frida. Number 1, what's your take on Stefan Molyneux? Seems to make me angrier than even Jordan Peterson." Yeah, I don't doubt that he does. I think that reaction is probably completely right. Yes, Jordan Peterson is a blowhard, and he's also an opportunist, and he got worldwide fame and then sort of acted like he was expecting it and deserves it. Those are all pathologies, and they merit you sort of keeping him at arm's length. Stefan Molyneux is considerably more malevolent than that. I don't believe that Jordan Peterson actually is malevolent at all. I honestly don't believe that. I think if you scraped away all of the weirdness and the presumption and the arrogance, you would probably get a man who actually does want to do good. I'm willing to allow that. That I don't think is true of Stefan Molyneux. It might have been true 10 years ago. It isn't true now. I dread his next act. I have no idea what it will be. He's been banned from everywhere that allows him to reach an audience, so I don't know what it would be unless those bans are removed. And that could happen. Very much so. If those avenues are nationalized by Nazis, by fascists, then those bans could be removed. Him, I don't doubt that you have a darker reaction to him. I don't know how much of him is available on YouTube. I imagine there are all sorts of mirrored and copied videos of his. He's not allowed on YouTube anymore, but I imagine there's still plenty of Stefan Molyneux content out there. Let's see here. And number 2, will Bro Watch be making a comeback? Is that connected to Stefan Molyneux? Yes, Bro Watch will be making a comeback. I have a candidate. A number of you have suggested this person, and specifically one video, but also this person just in general. And I have been resisting it because the person he has a huge following. He has a massive flock of acolytes, but it still seems very much like punching down to do a response video of any kind. I've had this conversation with a number of people. A number of you said, no, it isn't. It isn't. You're not talking about him. Think about the people he's watching, who are watching him, the young men who are watching him. That's a very valid approach. That's the way to get me to do it. So, Bro Watch will definitely return, yes. Chris Am said, how are we doing for time? Oh, we've got a little time for a little more. We're actually almost done. Let's go long and finish all of these. Chris Am 70 says, if you had to leave your home right now and all you could take was a bag of clothes, Frida, and 5 physical books, no electronic devices allowed, what is the way that I'm leaving? If this is true, these questions never work. They never work. They're never actually the question you have in mind. What books would you take? Right. You want to know what 5 books are my favorites, I guess, because the scenario is ridiculous. Not all scenarios like this are. I don't know. If there were a scenario where I had to leave my home right now, I could grab Frida and 5 physical books, I wouldn't be thinking about books. Obviously, that would be a crisis. This particular hypothetical it draws a blank for me every time that it's tried. Arg is back. What is your opinion of Rationality from AI to Zombies by Eleazar Yudkowsky? I'm not sure that I've read it. I think I would remember that name, even as bad with names as I am. CVBM457 says, Steve, I'm considering reading Clarissa. I'll admit, even I, the Spaminator, am a little intimidated by it. It's going to be a massive time sink. Would you consider it worth it? I would consider it worth it. Although, I should point out that if you were born in the 21st century, if you were born after 2020, chances are very good that you neurologically are not physically able to read Clarissa. So you might want to take that into account before you try. Before you spend the money on the book. It might be that you neurologically are not able to read it. Trip says, why does it seem like most writers use very bland, short sentences these days? Yeah. Like compare writers these days to John Ruskin or William Hazlitt, it just seems like the language is regressing or something. There's so much less complexity. I agree. I've noticed it. It's endemic. Very bland, very dead affect prose. I would blame not so much the language regressing as the absolute ubiquity of MFA programs, writing workshops. I think that's what does it. That is, it decided to impose this absolutely dead affect on the endless amounts of prose that come out of those programs. Nobody writes a novel anymore without having gone to at least one of those programs. I blame them. Scott Pearson says, you have encouraged us to emigrate to avoid the coming catastrophe. Where are you emigrating to? I've said every single time that I've urged you to leave this country, I've said that my traveling days are over. That is not me saying one thing and doing another. That is involves a whole bunch of factors that aren't on this channel that I have not talked about. You don't have those factors. You don't have those factors. You are able to leave. So if this is a backdoor attempt to indicate that I'm being a hypocrite, I'm not. I've said every time that I've said that everyone listening to me who lives in the United States should emigrate. If you're non-fascist, and I don't think I have any fascist listeners, you should emigrate. And you should do it today. You should set the ball in motion today. Most of you have heard this, and it's just rolled right off you. And you've thought, he's exaggerating, or the worst isn't going to happen, or when the worst happens, it won't affect my neighborhood, or it might affect my neighborhood, but I'm a patriot and I'll die fighting. America is worth it. All of that is wrong. But every time that I've given that advice, I've also said, I am not going anywhere. That is not hypocrisy. It has nothing to do with me being stubborn or not believing what I say. Let's see here. CVBN457 is back, the Spaminator. The number 13 may be considered unlucky, but can it give you high cholesterol? Prepare for spam. I've always been a reader, but now more than ever, as a result of being very sick with COVID about this time last year, while hospitalized and later recovering at home, for whatever reason, all I wanted to do was read. It was comforting, I suppose. Your videos help too. Can you name a book that brings you great comfort? No. No. Books are the enemy. Wade into them. Shoot them in the belly. When you put your hand into a promising debut, the moment before with your best friend's face, you'll know what to do. CVBN457. Steve, do you ever listen to music while reading or writing? If so, what do you listen to? I find total silence more distracting. All John Philip Sousa, all the time. And finally, CVBN457, Steve, what's a book that you like that most readers seem not to like? Well, we mentioned Clarissa. 21st century readers don't even read Clarissa. Most of them consider it boring. Maybe The Unabridged Edward Gibbon. Most people consider that to be boring. I don't. I think it's glorious. Probably that's a long list, or a video on its own, but it's not going to be now because we're already at 30 minutes. So we're going to wrap up. That is it. That is 3 videos. That is 13K Q&A. All that's left for me to do is offer my heartfelt thanks for getting me to 13K. That is amazing. I'm absolutely amazed by that. I'm happy to have you all here, my imaginary booktube friends, talking to you every day. I'm happy to be a booktuber who gets to 13K and isn't grateful because of monetization or monthly revenues, or because you've smashed that like button. I'm happy to be a booktuber who's just happy to have you here. So thank you. Thank you very much. It will probably be quite some time before we do another Q&A, but this one was a blast. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.